The dragons never sat down to eat. That is the first thing anybody learns who cooks on a courier road. They come in off the sky with their wings still cracking. They land hard enough to shake flour off the shelf, and they take their meat standing in the yard with their necks low and their eyes moving. 20 minutes and they are gone again, and the yard smells of hot stone and old lightning for an hour after. I fed them for 26 years at Ord's Bend on the Sump Road, where the grain flats go on so far and so flat that a man can watch a storm walk toward him for half a day and still have time to shell peas before it arrives. My canteen was called the Long Table because it was 40 feet of pine, scarred to velvet, under a tin roof that turned the sun into a drum. I had 11 stools nobody sat on, and a serving hatch out to the yard where the couriers took their trays. The couriers were dragons. Everything on that road was dragons. They carried the mail and the ore and the sealed writs of the Ember thrown from Ashmere to the coast and back, 400 miles a leg, and men like me kept the water tanks full and the meat coming and swept the scale shed of the grit they molted. It was a fair arrangement. They did not think much of us. They did not need to. You do not have to admire a stove to be glad it is hot. My name is Byrne Halloway. I have big hands, bad knees, and a temper that runs slow and long, like a fire in a wet log. That temper is the reason there is anything to tell. I want to be plain about what a dragon is, because I have heard men talk about them who never stood inside their shadow. They are not lizards and they are not horses, and they are certainly not people wearing a costume of scale. A grown courier stands taller than a hay wagon. The scales on their chests are the size of dinner plates and lie like roof slates, and when they breathe you hear it in your own ribs. Their eyes have a second lid that sweeps sideways, and when it sweeps you have stopped being interesting to them. They have 4 legs and a tail they use for balance and for saying things, and they have a way of putting their heads down and turning them so one eye faces you dead on. And that is a dragon looking at you the way you look at a coin you are not sure is real. They fold their wings the way a man folds a letter he does not want read. And they burn. That is the whole of it in the end. That is the thing under everything they are. Every one of them carries a light in the throat, and they can call it up as easy as you or I clear our chest, and it comes out of them in a rope of white and gold that will turn a fence post to a stick of charcoal in the time it takes to say so. Their names are fire names. Their court is called the Ember Throne. Their oldest and greatest is called the Kindler. When a courier greets another courier, they each let a little light show at the back of the mouth. A flicker, a candle behind a curtain. Hello, I am here. I am one of you. I only tell you all this so you will understand what it meant that Sedge could not do it. It was the tail end of the dry season when they brought her. A 4-wing crew off the Red Wing relay came down in the yard at noon, which was strange, because Red Wing crews ran the night leg and slept the day at Cross Marrow. The big bronze one was called Drost. I knew him the way you know a man who has eaten your food for 6 years and never once said your name. He was handsome the way a hammer is handsome. Bronze plates going green at the edges, a chest like the front of a locomotive, a scar down the left jaw where a hail season had caught him out over the fallow. He had something between his forelegs, pinning it to the packed dirt. "Cook," he said, "dragons speak our tongue when they want something. It comes out of that furnace of a chest lower than a man's voice can go, and the words are strangely careful like a big man carrying eggs. Cook, we have brought you a helper." The other 3 were laughing. A dragon laughs by rocking the head slowly side to side and letting the breath saw in the throat. It is not a nice sound. It was not a nice sound then. He stepped off the thing, and it did not run. She was maybe a yearling. Waist-high to me at the shoulder, which for a dragon is nothing, is a kitten. Scales sooty gray-green, dull, the color of a pot bottom, and along her flanks they had not seated properly, so she looked cobbled like a wall built by 2 men who were not speaking. Her wings were folded wrong. Her right hind leg turned in at the hock and she carried it light. Her tongue was notched, split at the tip and healed badly, and it hung out a little on that side because it did not fit her mouth any more. She had one eye on Drost and one eye on nothing, and she was so still that the stillness had a sound to it. "She eats," Dross said. "That is the only thing she does, so we have brought her to the man who feeds. You will find her useful. She can stir." And he rocked his head, sawing, and the crew sawed with him, and the yard filled up with that noise. "What's wrong with her?" I said. Dross put his head down and turned it so one eye faced me. The second lid swept once and swept back. "She has cold throat," he said. I did not know the word. I found out. Every road has its own dictionary, and the dragons had never bothered to teach me theirs, and I had never bothered to ask, because a man with 200 pounds of stew on the boil does not ask philosophical questions of the customers. Cold throat, hollow throat, born without the light. It happens, Drost said, the way a foal is born blind. Rarely. And when it happens, the brood mothers know within the first hour, because the hatchling does not answer the greeting flicker, and then the thing is carried up and let go over open water, and everybody agrees quietly that it was never really there. But this one, Drost said, and there was a note in it I did not care for, a note of a man explaining why a bad joke is funny. This one was hidden. Somebody hid it. 2 years. And now she has been found, and the crews will not carry her, and the throne will not name her, and the water is far away. He shrugged with his whole enormous back. You feed things, feed it. He wanted me to laugh. That is the part I have thought about, all the years since. A dragon 4 times my weight, who could have opened me like a can, standing in my own yard waiting for a 57-year-old cook to laugh at his joke, because a joke is only finished when somebody else laughs. I have a slow temper. It came up out of the wet log then, and I felt it arrive, and I kept it behind my teeth where it belonged. Trays are up, I said. Mutton and the gray barley. Water's in the trough, don't take it out of the tank's for the boilers. They ate, they left. The yard went quiet the way it does, with the dust still hanging where the wings had been, and the grasshoppers starting up again one at a time. And the tin roof ticking. The yearling had not moved. I stood in the hatch and looked at her, and she looked at the dirt. 200 yards behind her, the sorghum went on to the edge of the world. Well, I said to nobody, that's a hell of a thing. I want to tell you I made a decision. I did not make a decision. I had 4 gallons of drippings to render and my knees hurt, and I went back inside. And I was not thinking about her at all. And my hands took a chipped enamel bowl down off the nail and filled it with the bone broth I keep at the back of the stove, because bone broth is the one thing in a kitchen that is always there and is never anybody's. I carried it out and set it in the dirt 8 feet from her, and went back inside and did not watch. When I came out at dusk to bank the fire, the bowl was clean and dry, and she was lying under the water tank with her bad leg out straight, and the last of the light was on the sorghum, and she watched me cross the yard with both eyes for the first time. That was the first ladle. I have thought about the size of it. 1 ladle, maybe 1.5 pints of what I would have thrown to the dogs if I had dogs. She did not stir anything. I want that on the record too, in case anybody has told you otherwise. She could not have lifted a spoon. Her forelegs were made for landing on, and her claws would have taken the bottom out of a pot. She could not fetch, because she did not understand fetching. She could not talk, because the voice of a dragon comes up the same pipe as the fire, and when the fire is not there, the voice is not there either. She could make one noise. It was a sort of tick, a dry click far back like a beetle in a wall. For 6 days she made no noise at all. She slept under the tank. She drank from the trough at night when she thought I was in. In the morning there was a bowl of broth where the bowl had been the night before, because I am a creature of habit, and because putting it there had stopped being a decision and become a chore, and I have never in my life failed to do a chore. On the 7th day I was hauling the ash pan out the side door, and my knee went, the bad one, the left, and I came down on the step with the pan, and about 9 pounds of hot ash went across my forearm. I said several words. I got the sleeve off, and when I looked up she was standing over me. That close a dragon smells like a smithy and a river bed. She had her head down and turned. one eye on my arm, and the second lid was not sweeping. Her breath went across the burn, and it was cool. That is the thing nobody tells you, that a cold throat's breath is genuinely cold, that whatever furnace the rest of them carry, she had a cellar instead. The ash had my arm hissing, and her breath went over it, and the pain shut its mouth for a second, and in that second she made the tick. Then she backed off 4 steps, fast, dragging the bad leg, and got under the tank and put her chin on her forelegs and did not look at me for the rest of the day. I sat on the step and held my arm, and I thought, 2 years, somebody hid you for 2 years, and you learned to help, and you learned that helping gets you thrown out over the water. I said, all right. That is as close to a decision as I ever came. I called her sedge because the grass that comes up in the wet corner of my yard is sedge, and it is gray-green, and it is not much, and it is there every year no matter what. I did not tell anybody I had named her. You do not name a thing in front of people who will ask why. Now I have to tell about the season, and the season is where a man's life is actually spent. Not in the day the dragon lands, but in the 400 mornings after. She ate. Drost had that much right. A yearling dragon eats like a thrashing crew, and she was behind on it. She was rack thin. You could count the plates on her sides where they should have been buried in muscle. I had a canteen budget from the Thrones Road office in Ashmere, paid quarterly, calculated on couriers fed. There was no line on the form for a dragon nobody had named. So I bought sheep. The first month I bought them out of the drippings money. The second month I bought them out of the money I had put by for the roof, which had needed doing since the year my wife died, and which I had somehow never done. And there is a lesson in that, but I do not intend to learn it now. The third month Ockley, who kept the station and the pumps and the ledger and was as decent a man as ever failed to have an opinion, came into the kitchen and stood there turning his hat. "Burn," he said, "the crews are talking. Let them." Drost's crew went straight through to cross Marrow Tuesday, didn't set down. Their loss, it was the good barley. Burn, he was still turning the hat. Redwing put it about that the long table's gone strange, that there's a hollow throat in the yard and the cook feeds it out of his own hand. They don't like it. He hunted for a word he had heard and not understood. It's an unlucky thing to them, apparently. It's the way they are about it. They let bobbies go over open water, I said. They can afford to be unlucky. He looked at the floor. Trays are down 40%. I know what the trays are. They'll pull the contract. I know. He put his hat on and took it off. She can't do anything, Burn, that's what they say. She's not stupid, they say she's clever as any of them, that's what makes it worse, apparently. She's all there, she's just got nothing in her. He said it apologetically, as if he were passing on a diagnosis. There's no light. Frank, I said, his name was Tam. I called him Frank for 30 years for a reason neither of us could recall. Frank, I have made stew for 6,000 of them, and not one has ever said thank you. And I did not hold it against them, because that is how they are made. Now you tell me a thing they made and then threw away is sitting in my yard, and you want me to hold that against her. He went out. He was a decent man. He kept me on the ledger as a full station for 2 more quarters, and I know what that cost him, and we never spoke of it once. Here is what a season with sedge was actually like, since I have spent all these years being asked, and the answers always disappoint. She was funny. That is the thing I never can get across. There was a comedy in her that I do not think her own kind had ever been in a position to see. She had a horror of the chickens. 400 pounds of dragon flattening herself behind the water tank because Ockley's white hen had come around the corner with intent. She could not learn that the tin roof was hot. She learned it every day at about 11 in the morning and unlearned it in the night. And every day at about 11 she would put 1 forefoot on the low edge of the roof and take it off again and give me a look of frank betrayal, as if I had moved the sun. She sat outside the hatch while I worked. And I talked. I had not talked in the kitchen since Anne died. I talked about the stock and the stove and the war I was in and the men in it, and about Anne, and about the roof. She listened with her head turned so one eye faced me, and the second lid did not sweep, and I understood after a while that this was not a small thing. To not have the lid sweep is to keep on finding a thing worth looking at. She could not answer. She had the tick and she had her tail and she had the set of her wings, and inside a season we had between us maybe 100 words, none of them spoken. She could carry. That surprised me. Nobody had ever asked her to. She could take the ash pan in her jaws and walk it out to the pit without spilling a spoonful, and once she understood that the pit was where the ash went, she did it every morning before I woke, and every morning for 11 years afterward I woke up and remembered that nobody was doing it. And she was cold, I have said this. Whatever the rest of them had in their throats, she had the opposite, and it was not nothing. In the long heat of the fallow, when the tin roof made the kitchen unfit for men, she would come and lie along the outside of the north wall with her chin in the sedge, and the wall would sweat, and the butter would keep. In the summer of that year I lost nothing to the heat, not a pound of meat. The other stations on the sump road lost a third and blamed the drought. I did not think about what that meant. Why would I thought, the butter keeps. The fallow has a wind that comes down out of the north in the late season with hail in it, and one night in the 9th month it took the tin off the kitchen roof. The roof I had not fixed with the money I had spent on sheep, and I will not pretend I did not think about that, standing in the dark in 3 inches of water with the rain coming into my life directly out of the sky. Sedge got over the top of the stove. I did not ask her to. It took her a while to work out how, with the bad leg, and she knocked the flue down doing it, and she lay across the firebox with her wings out and her body over the coals, and the coals hissed and did not go out, and the rain came down on her back all night and ran off, and she made the tick every so often, and I sat under the end of the long table with a horse blanket and watched a dragon keep a fire alive with her own body. In the morning the coals were red and the sky was scrubbed, and everything I owned was ruined except the fire. She could not have lit that fire, not with 100 years to try. Any hatchling out of any brood on that road could have made it a bonfire with one breath. She kept it instead. I have had a long time to think about the difference. Making is loud, keeping is not. The rumor got to Ashmere in the winter. I did not know that at the time. I only knew the road went quiet, that the couriers stopped setting down at Ord's Bend altogether and started overflying, and that on clear days I would see one of them a mile up, going nowhere in particular, turning a slow circle over the sorghum looking down. The first one who came was a young courier called Reuel, slate blue and gawky, with a wingspan he had not grown into. He landed badly at the far end of the yard, on the sorghum side, as far from the tank as he could get and still be in the yard, and he stood there with his neck up and his tail lashing, and made a great show of having landed there entirely by accident. "I want water," he said. "Trough's by the shed." "I do not want it from the trough." "Then you want a bucket, and the bucket costs you nothing, and you'll take it standing there, because I'm not carrying it 30 yards to save you a walk." He came for the water. He drank with one eye on the tank, where Sedge was lying with her chin down, absolutely still, in the way she went still when they came, going back to being a thing that made no sound. Reuel said, "Does it?" and stopped. I said, "And she does everything except the one." He was very young. It has taken me a long time to be fair about them, and I will start with him. He was very young, and he had been told, all his life, in the way that we all are told, what is beneath contempt. And he stood in my yard with the water running off his jaw, and he looked at her lying there under the tank, and I watched the second lid sweep across his eye, and I watched it sweep back and stay open. "She is thin," he said. She was thinner. He came back 9 days later with half a sheep in his claws and dropped it in the dirt and left without a word. He did it 11 more times that winter, always at dusk, always without a word, And once he brought a whole bale of dry sedge from the river country because he had noticed she liked to lie in the sedge. And I stood in the doorway with my mouth open, because I had not noticed that he had noticed. That is where the story would have ended if the Ember throne were a decent institution. A cook, an outcast, a young courier bringing mutton at dusk. I would have died with a dragon in my yard, and the town would have said Holloway went strange after his wife, and the road would have gone on. But there was a thing happening at Ashmere that I knew nothing about. 400 miles up the Sump Road, in the great black basalt hall where the Ember throne sat. The fire was going out. Not the fire of the dragons. Theirs is theirs, and it was fine, it is fine. There is a courier over my roof as I write this, and I can hear the light in his chest from here. I mean the Ember, the literal one. The thing the throne is named for and built around and, as it turned out, absolutely dependent upon, and which not one dragon in 10,000 had ever seen, and which I would see on an ordinary Thursday from 4 feet away, with a dish towel over my shoulder. Ossorain came in the spring. I was rendering fat. It was the middle of the afternoon, and the light in that country in spring is a white light. It comes off the flats and into everything, and there is no hiding in it. Sedge was at the north wall with her chin in the sedge. I heard nothing at all. That is the first thing. Every courier I ever fed announced himself half a mile out with a crack like a dropped door. The yard went dark and then it went light again, and there was an ancient dragon standing in it, and the sorghum on the whole east side had gone flat. I want to describe her honestly. She was the size of a barn. That is not a figure of speech. She stood in my yard and the water tank came to her elbow. Her scales were slate, the gray of the underside of storm, and they had gone thin and papery at the edges the way an old woman's hands go, and along her spine and her jaw and the great ridge of her brow the plates had lifted and cracked and grown moss. Moss. Actual moss, pale green in the seams of her, the way it grows on a stone that has not moved in a long time. Her wings, opened, would have covered my building and Ockley's and the shed. She kept them shut. Her eyes were milk-white at the rims and clear as water in the middle, and they did not blink for a long time. Behind her, on the flats, standing in the flattened sorghum in a wide arc, were 19 dragons of the Ember throne, bronze and red and black, with collars of hammered gold across the chest, and their heads were up and their eyes were on the old one, and none of them made a sound. Drost was there. I saw him and he saw me see him. Ossorain breathed out and it was not fire, and there was something wrong with the sound of it, a thin whistle at the end of the breath, like a bellows with a split in the leather. She put her head down. She turned it. One eye faced me. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, and it was the deepest thing I have ever heard, and it had at the bottom of it a kind of grinding, the way a stone mill sounds 2 rooms away. "You are the man who feeds," she said. "There is a moment in a life when you understand that you are a small thing standing in the open, and everything you have ever done is now going to be looked at, and there is no time to arrange it." "I'm the cook," I said. "Burn Holloway." "Holloway," she said, and she said it slowly, as if setting it down somewhere. "Holloway, you have kept a hollow throat alive for a year and a season." "I've kept a canteen. She's been in the yard." Behind her, in the arc, one of them made a low sound, and Ossorain moved one claw a half-inch, and the sound stopped. "Do you know what you have done?" she said. I have never been quick. I stood there with the towel on my shoulder and the fat going to smoke behind me on the stove, and I looked past her huge gray head to the north wall, where Sedge had gotten to her feet with her bad leg under her and her wings clamped down and her whole body flat to the boards, absolutely still, doing the thing she did, making herself a thing that no one had to see. 2 years hidden, a season in my yard, and the moment the throne itself came down out of the sky she went straight back to being small, because that is what they had taught her. That is what you learn when the water is far away and everybody agrees you were never really there. The slow temper came up out of the wet log. "I know what you did," I said. 19 dragons of the Ember throne came off their haunches at once, and the noise of it was like a rockfall, and I heard the light come up in 19 chests, that low fluttering roar that is the last thing a great many men have heard. Asurain did not move. "Say it," she said. "You took a hatchling that was made wrong and you carried her up over open water and let her go," I said. "That is not a rumor. Dross told me. He told me like it was weather." My hands were shaking. I put them on the hatch. "She can't make a light, all right. Neither can I, neither can the hen. I have fed 6,000 of you standing in my own yard and not one of you ever once." I stopped, because I heard where it was going and it was not the point, and because I have a horror of a man who makes a wound about himself. "She's a good soul," I said. "That's all. She keeps my fire and she carries my ash and she has never once been anything but decent, and she has had no reason to be, and if you have come 400 miles to take her out over the water, you will do it in front of me and I will not laugh." The fat caught fire behind me. I remember that. There was a small kitchen fire going on the whole rest of this conversation, and neither of us said anything about it. Asurain looked at me. The second lid did not sweep. "You think we have come to kill her," she said. "I think you've come to finish it." The old dragon made a sound then that I could not read at all, a long low pull of air, and the split leather whistle at the end of it, and she laid her enormous head down in the dirt of my yard, so that her eye was level with my chest, and moss came off her brow onto the ground. "Cook," she said, "I have 3 months of fire left in me, and when it is gone the ember goes with it, and there is no dragon living who can carry it but the one lying against your wall.